Something I love about botanical dye, besides the brilliant hues we can create, is that it is so sustainable. I mean, we are working with 100% biodegradable materials here. Hi, I'm Geraldine, and today we are going to learn all about botanical dye. We're going to make a few different botanical dyes with ingredients most likely already in your kitchen. It's almost time to brew our botanical dye pot. First, we have to prep our fabric. So to prep the fabric, we weigh each item individually while it is still dry. Once it's weighed, if you have a scale that is, and if you don't worry. In the notes of this class, I'm going to give you a list of rough estimates of, say, a t-shirt, a pair of socks, a pair of underwear, a tea towel. I'll list all of those weights for you. So once you have that ready to go, you're going to want to scour your fabric. So we can do a quick and easy scouring version in this class. That is, just take your cloth or your garment and run it through a long, hot wash cycle with pH neutral soap. If I was doing a professional dye job and I really wanted to make sure I was exquisitely scouring the garment, I would put it in a pot on my stove full of soda ash water and bring it to just under a boil for an hour. And this would make sure that any sort of residue from the manufacturing process was no longer on that garment. However, for this class, I think that running your garment through the long hot wash cycle will work just fine for your scouring process. After you run your garment through the wash cycle, soak it in a tub of water. If you don't have a big bowl like this, you can just plug up your sink or bathtub and soak your garment in there. This soaking step is really important, so don't skip it. Soaking your garment for at least an hour, make sure that the garment is fully saturated, and when you dip it into the dye pot, it will uptake the color evenly. So now we are making our first dye bath. We are going to be making an onion skin dye pot. So in this pot, I have probably a pound of frozen onion skins from my freezer that I've been collecting over about 6 months. I'm going to put these last minute ones in there as well. I have water up to about here, and I'm going to stir it around and cook it on my stove for about an hour. So this dye pot is the one I'm going to brew for the longest. I'm going to keep it at about 180 degrees. If you don't have a scale, that's just under boiling before those bubbles start beginning to form. And I'm going to keep it there for about an hour. If I have all the time in the world, I will let my dye pot fully cool. I'll remove it from the stove, remove it from the heat source, and let it fully cool before straining it and adding my garment. But if you don't have that much time, you can at least just make sure that your dye pot steeps for about an hour. Now that the onion dye pot is brewing on the stove, it's time to show you how to make a black tea dye pot. So I'm going to be weighing a garment in here that's about 90 grams. So I actually did something experimental and I put a little bit more tea than was necessary in here. So half of 90 is 45, and I could have gotten away with just about 45 grams of tea in here. However, I brought it up to 100 grams of tea because I have loads of black tea I'm not drinking, and I think that it's going to give me an extra dark, rich color. So I have my black tea and my water in here. I'm stirring it around, and I'm going to bring it to my stove and bring it to just under a simmer for only 15 minutes. That's all I really need to brew a really dark, rich pot of black tea dye. So if you're doing the black tea at home, all you need to do is simmer it for just under a simmer for about 15 minutes and you'll be good to go. Then remove it from the heat source and strain out the tea bags and reserve your liquid, of course, because that's your dye pot, and you'll be good to go. So next I'm going to show you a turmeric dye pot. So lastly, we are brewing up a botanical dye pot of turmeric. So when we're working with a paste, the best thing to do is to first measure out how much you're going to use of the powder and then dissolve it into a paste with some hot water. So put it into your pot, pour a little hot water in there, make it into a nice paste, and then slowly pour in your cold water and dissolve it into the whole bath. So I'm going to be dyeing a garment that's about 90 to 100 grams in this dye pot. I'm doing a flour sack, like a dish towel, like one of these on the table actually. And I'm going to do equal weights turmeric powder to the dish towel. So I actually put about 100 grams of turmeric powder in here. If you're guesstimating, if you don't have a scale, just know the more you add, the more vibrant and bright the colors will be. And if you go for less powder, it will just be a lighter color. So you can always play with it and add more or less, depending on the color variation that you want as a result.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest videos.